Hello and welcome to my channel. This one's about modifying your knives or fixing your knives or handles, basically. This one's about handles, covers, handles, whatever you want to call it. Alright, now as you know, this Imperial knife lost its simulated covers here. Look like they're pinned down, but they're not. The advantage that this thing gives me right here is it gives me the opportunity to try to make my own set of pins. So here you got your template. Well, I use that to, you can see the black here. I use that as a Sharpie to draw an outline on here. And this is where I started my first learning to deal with. Look how much acrylic you've got on top and just a very thin plate of abalone. Now this will still work, but I actually wish this acrylic was about half as thick. So I took a high-speed Dremel tool with a cutoff wheel, and I started doing this. First mistake, when you go high speed on plastic, it's going to start melting. And when something starts melting, it cuts differently than something that wouldn't melt. And so I quickly gave up on that and said, all right, I'm going to have to use something not high speed. I'm going to have to cut it. And what I used, which is really not the best thing for this either, was this saw right here. And this is, the teeth really should be finer than this for what I'm dealing with. I really should have used a hacksaw. But anyway, live and learn. See, that's my whole thing on these procedures right here is experiment. See, I'm gonna experiment with an inexpensive, basically about as cheap as you can get, Imperial. And if I mess it up and if I screw this up, well, all I gotta do is glue this on and it's fixed, you know? So, I'm learning. All right, so the first thing I did was I hacksawed and everything. And then, well, I didn't hacksaw, I used that thing and I cut it out. All right, and then you gotta shape it. So, I used sandpaper. I was going back and forth. Now, with sandpaper, and like any time else when you cut acrylic, see, it's nice and shiny, and you can see through there because it's highly polished. But anytime you cut it or do anything else like that, it's gonna fog up on you. So how do you get this back? Well, you can try a bunch of different grits of sandpaper. You know, I started with the coarse just for shaping, and then I, went 1500 and 3000. And a lot of times all that does is scratch. So my other idea was, all right, this is plastic, right? Yes, it's plastic. So what should I do with plastic? Let's melt it. So I got my Saturn Iron and I started going crazy. Now the Saturn Iron works. Again, I had too much material. Let me see if you gotta remember which way you're making these things. All right, it's kind of curved like that. Yeah. Now the Saturn Iron gives you some advantages because you heat the tip up and you just flow with it. All right, so this plastic is going to go like oil or sludge. It's not necessarily going to catch on fire, but it's going to stink the hell out of the place. You want to make sure your smoke detector's off, and preferably do this outside. It has the advantage if you get any gaps, you can push it over. But I don't know if you can see this right here, but it'll generate bubbles too if you push too fast or if you're going too weird. So what I did was I took the Saturn and I tried to get it level because it's a cone shape. And I just started going down here trying to reduce some of the mass of the thing. And trying to get it clear. And it was kind of like a painting motion. Sometimes you just have to sense it, where you can get it just right and smooth it out. All right, so that didn't work too bad, but again, there were some places that were dull. So this is plastic. What can you do with plastic? Butane lighter, jet butane lighter. I'd go with that, and that would kind of melt. Now, it will also catch it on fire. So you have to, you're trying to get it at just that right temperature. The temperature of melting plastic, but not ignition. And it worked out fairly okay. So this one is kind of like you're putting lipstick on a pig, you know? You're trying to improve the looks of a pig, but even lipstick on a pig, it's still going to be a pig. Now, this thing ain't a pig knife. I'm just saying. It's just an expression that I was using there. And you can see when I was doing other stuff, I got carried away and scratched the bolster and all that. This is just a work in progress. It's something that I wanted, to learn on. Now, Gizmo was talking to me on one of my videos where I did the Sidewinder buoy update, and I said I put some linseed oil on this and everything else. Well, he had left me a message saying, like, what's the hurry? Why, sometimes when you're working on a knife, it takes a while. You work on one thing, then you work on the other, and that's kind of what I'm doing. I don't know if I gave everybody the impression I was finished with it, but that got me to thinking. I had already smoothed this out, and it was getting to feel pretty good. And I'm not finished with the handle. I'm going to keep doing that linseed oil. But then I thought, you know what? Why don't I hit it with 1500 grit sandpaper instead of... I'd been using other things to round it and smooth it off, and it did round the corners and everything. But you talk about smooth. I first hit it with 1500 grit, just going back and forth like this. And man, it's really starting to feel smooth and everything. So then I went to 3000 grit, and I went back and forth. Now that you can kind of see there's some places where it's still scratched and everything. Like I said, work in progress. Then I took it, when I got it to, like about the smoothness I wanted and everything, I took it to the buffing wheel, and I put it on just the buffing wheel with no compound, the loosest one they've got, the one that's just a wheel, but it looks all flappy and everything until it spins up. And I started polishing this. And yeah, I'm going to hit it with some more linseed oil tonight. Let it soak in. Here's a little, it got a little piece of cloth in there because there's almost a crack forming right there on that piece of wood. But yeah, it's making the knife your own. You're changing it from, this thing was, basically just a wall hanger. And yeah, it looked okay as a wall hanger, but as soon as you pick it up, the first thing you would notice is, wow, like picking up a piece of lumber, really, like picking up a 2x4, a piece of lumber. That's about how well it fit, And after polishing it and rounding it off, ooh, it made it a lot better. And then with sanding it, man, that's even more fantastic. So this is rapidly becoming one of my favorite buoys. It's got the looks, it's got the feel, it's got the functionality. It's not too heavy. It's got the distinctiveness, that spine there. And as long as this lasts, it's got the Sidewinder look to it too. So I'm pretty happy with this knife. And another thing about it is when you're taking care of your knife and you're polishing it, you're making it yours, it's different. Now this knife is not the same as any other Sidewinder you pick up out of there, because this one to me is going to feel a lot better than any stock Sidewinder that comes out of the factory, unless they spin all the time, which they're not going to do. They're going to get as close as they can, but they ain't got time to do the final refinements. Whatever it is you want to put to your blade. If it's the edge, they're not going to be able to put the best edge on the knife. They're going to be able to put a functional edge. It's the same way with the handles and everything. They're not going to be able to make this a smooth transition for you. They'll get close, but they've got a limited amount of time that they can spend on a knife. So, the moral of the story is, yeah, a knife is finished when you say it's finished, you know. If in your mind you think, that's good enough. And then every time you pick it up, you go, ooh, I wish I could have done this or that. Well, there's no time like the present, you know. While you got the sandpaper, while you got the time, pick up your knife. And just when you're doing this, be careful, because I had a naked blade, especially when you're buffing. You got to know what you're doing with buffing. You never buff from like the rotation was like this. You never buff on the very top of it. You want to buff on the bottom. If you don't know how to buff, watch a video or something at least before you do it, because the speed that buffing wheel is going, you think, oh, there's nothing on it, it's just a buffer. You got a knife too. And you're giving it some force, and it catches it just right. Man, these things will throw knives. They can be very dangerous. So you got to watch what you're doing, but it gives you advantage of a machine. A machine, this thing is basically like hand rubbing it for you, you know, when it's buffing it. Whereas you would have to be sitting there with a cloth and just doing it constantly. And after years, you might get it, you know, super smooth. I don't know. But anyway, that's what I think is, this one is becoming one of my favorite Bowie knives. It's inexpensive, but it's got everything going for it. And it just gets better the more I mess around with it. So there you go. I know it was kind of long-winded. I didn't really say much other than modify your knife if you want to. Thank you for watching, and have a nice day.